So you want to learn how to pilot everyone's favorite train cosplay? Give some monsters some extreme dental surgery? Then Lance might be for you. Let's see what it's got. Before we get into the moveset, Lance does not have the standard roll evade when you press B. Instead, you get step evades. When performed from idle, you can only use a back hop, but after any hop or mid combo, you can press to the left or right to perform a sidestep instead. As Lance, you can chain up to 3 step evades in any direction, back or to either side. You can also perform an extended back hop by pressing back at the same time as you press B, which gets you more distance but cannot link into more step evades. The easiest way to perform an extended backstep is mid-combo. You can also slightly press back on the C-stick just enough so you don't turn in that direction. If you screw up this extended backstep from idle, you'll turn around instead. If you're coming from the other Blade Master weapons, you may be thrown off by the lack of a forward roll, but remember that these step evades have the same iframe timing as a base roll, 6 frames, or about a fifth of a second, which can be more potent than you expect sometimes. If you're really good at Lance, you can abuse these back hops to effectively stay in place to dodge. Just keep in mind that some attacks can be difficult or outright impossible to iframe like this, so apply this where you can. Press X to low thrust, or press A to high thrust. The high thrust deals more damage than the low thrust, but because you're thrusting, you might whiff a low profile monster. Lance in general has some of the poorest coverage out of all the Blade Master weapons, so really pay attention to where you are and what you want to hit. You can perform any low or high thrust up to 2 times in a row. Pressing X or A a third time in a string performs a strong thrust, low or high. This strong thrust has more startup, more end lag, and less individual damage than the normal thrusts, but hits multiple times. Because of these properties, this is extremely useless. Not only can the extra startup and end lag get you hit if you misinput a strong thrust, but the multi-hit nature of this attack also eats up your sharpness, which you'd rather save for a different attack. The only use case of this attack is as a finisher for specific windows if you're using Element Lance. Your standard thrust attacks are way better and eat less sharpness for this purpose. Try to avoid using this move. An acceptable but not perfect replacement for this is the Wide Sweep, performed with X and A. The Wide Sweep can replace any attack in your 3-step combo. This is the most accessible sweeping move with Lance. It's useful as a faster but weaker finisher, or if you're just trying to sweep out some small monsters. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Lance has a shield with which you can guard attacks. You can press and hold R to guard, or even press RX and A to unsheath into guard. There's a bit of end lag when you stop pressing R, during which your hunter will still guard incoming attacks, but you can back up with your guard up to instantly put down your guard. With your guard up, you won't regenerate stamina, but you can move around while you guard, also regenerating stamina as you do so. While moving around with guard, note that you can move up and fall down from small ledges. If you do so, you'll temporarily put down your guard, so watch out. Guarding allows you to block incoming attacks from the front, costing stamina and potentially a bit of health depending on the strength of the incoming attack. The harder an attack is to guard, the more stamina it'll eat, and the longer you'll be stuck recovering from the attack. For powerful attacks, you'll also take chip damage, which scales with the damage you would have taken otherwise. With Lance's dedicated shield, you also have the highest base guard values compared to something like Charge Blade or Greatsword, and you can even guard things from wider angles than those weapons as well. Furthermore, unlike those weapons, you won't lose sharpness when you guard. The big caveat with guarding is that you'll block individual hitboxes from attacks. Unlike evading, where you're given iframes, you take on greater risk blocking attacks with multiple hitboxes, such as a Raphalos' aerial charge or Yangaruga's multi-peck attack, since you'll need to guard, and thus, have enough stamina for each hitbox to guard those attacks. If you attempt to guard when your stamina is in the red, then you simply won't guard the attack at all. Keep an eye on your stamina gauge, or do what the cool kids do. Simply don't guard. Simply put, guarding in this game is like a fighting game where your opponent is always plus on block. Because of how laggy guarding is and the amount of stamina it eats up, some monsters will just crack open your guard like an egg. Even if you use Mega Dash juices to remove the stamina concern, monsters can and will chip you out of guarding, and with the existence of hyper monsters and their attacks being more difficult to guard, guarding in general becomes increasingly awkward to justify. Taken all together, this means that the weapon with the best shield in the game uses step evades as its best defensive option. How do you fuck up this hard? All of this results in Lance being among the most punishing weapons to play in GU. Guarding things might get you comboed, attempting and failing to iframe things might get you comboed, and even trying to sheath and run might get you comboed because your sheathing time is on the higher end of weapons. You can't even roll on the ground when you're knocked down just to get out of position. Now, I'm not saying that you should never guard, but that it's not exactly your main defensive option. Fortunately, GU's Hunter arts greatly reduce the amount of risk you take when playing Lance, so taking arts like Absolute Evasion and Absolute Readiness are highly valuable. Back to your moveset. While guarding, you can perform a guard thrust by pressing X. This temporarily puts down your guard while performing the attack, but lets you regenerate stamina doing so. You can press A instead to start up the counter thrust. This attack lets you charge up a high thrust while guarding at the same time. If you hold R, you'll unleash the high thrust when fully charged. If you instead release R right after you press A, you'll just use a normal high thrust. If a monster attack connects while you're charging up, one of 5 things will happen, depending on the guard value of the attack. Attacks with especially low knockback will trigger a low thrust. Attacks with slightly higher knockback will trigger a high thrust. Attacks with lower medium knockback will instead trigger a strong low thrust, while attacks with medium knockback will trigger a strong high thrust instead. Attacks that knock you back heavily will instead interrupt you and prevent you from counterattacking entirely. The counterattack can be used from almost any attack in your basic 3-stage combo, even after a strong thrust. Any counter thrust variant will link into the second stage of your combo, so it's good for looping thrust combos as well. It's also great at intercepting individual attacks to keep up offensive momentum mid-combo. For example, if you're poking at a monster as it's about to start up an attack, start up a counter thrust and keep your combo going. Just keep in mind a few things. First, you can't counter thrust after a wide sweep used as the third attack of a combo. Second, if you guard an attack with counter thrust, you'll immediately put down your guard, so watch out for those multi-hit attacks. Best to guard until the last hit for those ones. Finally, the variant of attack you use for counter thrust is based on how difficult the attack is to guard. Upping your guard strength with armor skills such as guard +1 or +2 will let you counter stronger attacks faster. Pressing forward and X while you're guarding lets you use the guard advance. It eats up a bit of stamina to perform and doesn't give you iframes, but lets you quickly dash forward while guarding. As long as incoming attacks don't give you large lockback, you'll keep on dashing through uninterrupted, which can be useful not only for closing in on monsters, but also for quickly stepping out of the way of an incoming attack. Think of it as the forward roll for Lance. If you perform a guard advance off of a ledge, you'll descend down the ledge while keeping your guard up. If you attack while in this state, you'll put down your guard afterwards. You can also guard advance up smaller ledges, but be aware that your guard will be put down for a short time. Unlike the counter thrust, you'll keep on guarding multiple incoming attacks, not just the first one. But keep an eye on your stamina if you do this. During the guard advance, you can press X to perform the shield bash, which deals a bit of impact damage while putting down your guard. From this, you can launch into your standard combos. Last, but certainly not least, is Lance's infamous charge. Pressing R, X, and A, or pressing the special attack button will make you dash forward, continuously dealing damage, but also consuming stamina as you do so. You can slightly adjust the direction you're charging in by pressing on the C stick, but you can't make any major changes to your direction. Charging consumes a bunch of sharpness, not just because of the fast ticks, but also because it eats up 3 sharpness per tick. If you fall to yellow sharpness, then you'll bounce off of things you hit. Same goes for if you charge into a wall. With orange sharpness, you immediately stop charging instead. If you're stubborn enough to fall to red sharpness, then you'll fall on your ass. While you're charging, you can perform one of 4 things. Press X to perform the bog standard charge finisher, which deals much more damage than a normal thrust attack. Press back relative to your character, and X to perform the turnaround finisher, which deals the same damage as a standard charge finisher, but has a greater sweeping range. You can press B without a direction to stop on the spot. Press forward and B instead to perform a quick hop, consuming a bit of stamina to do so. Press X during this hop to perform a jumping charge finisher, which can deal mounting damage while hitting higher monster parts. While you're charging, you'll automatically climb up and jump off of smaller ledges. As most styles, the best thing to do is to keep landing charge ticks until your window is about to close, then perform the finisher. Do note that charging will eat up a bunch of sharpness per tick, so keep an eye on your sharpness. Furthermore, charge finishers have a bunch of end lag, so don't try to risk it if you don't know your windows. And try not to slip off the monster's model while you're charging. If you do so, use a turnaround finisher immediately to prevent you whiffing the attack entirely. Oh, and try not to charge too much in multiplayer. You'll end up trampling other people around you, so mind your surroundings. Lastly, let's cover the mid-air jumping attacks. You can press X in midair for a jumping thrust, which acts as the first hit of your 3-stage combo. Or you can press X and A to start charging in midair, the first hit of which will deal mounting damage. If you do this, you cannot immediately perform a jumping charge finisher. You're gonna have to land first. Alright, let's summarize how Lance plays. Lance is a weapon that thrives against monsters that remain stationary. Its counter thrust attacks allow you to remain on the offense if monsters try to strike back with weak attacks, while turtling up if necessary with guards. On longer windows, try to mix in charge and charged finishers to effectively dole out damage, but try not to overcommit on charged finishers. Keep an eye on your stamina too, since, much like dual blades, Lance can consume an awful lot of stamina between charging, guarding, counter thrusting, and step evading. A lot of people will opt to use Mega Dash juices to alleviate the stamina concern, but otherwise, if your stamina is too low, don't forget that you can just chill out and sheathe at the cost of damage. Be sure to work on your positioning and angling in order to land your precise thrust attacks and charge finishers. If you're fighting more agile monsters, don't forget that sheathing and dashing towards monsters is always an option, or if you're more daring and confident, throw a charge their way. If you're about to eat an incoming attack, consider your options. Counter thrusts are good if you're already close and the attack is just one hitbox. It's also the only option, besides step evading, to use mid-combo. Guard advancing is great if you need to gap close a bit, or normally guarding is fine if you're not confident in your iframing skills. Otherwise, be sure to sprinkle in step evades for precise iframe timings, or even just to get a bit closer if you've the stamina to spend. Now for some basic combos. An easy one to use is the standard thrust loop. Use either low or high thrust up to 2 times, then use a counter thrust to reset your thrust loop. Be sure to release R soon after you press A to get the uncharged version. If you think that a monster attack will come out, then go ahead and charge up that counter thrust for guaranteed safety. Or, well, mostly guaranteed. If you need to dump damage on down windows, well, there's not really a combo for this, so much as a whole move. Remember, charge functions really well on downed monsters, so if you get a trip, throw a charge at a monster's weak spot. Remember to try to not slip off of the monster's model and use a charge finisher before you run out of stamina. Now for some neat details about Lance. The biggest did you know I can dump on you is that Lance has a unique property to its attacks. Lance-based moves, also known as not attacks that use the shield, can use the impact hit zone to calculate damage, as long as the impact hit zone exceeds the cut hit zone by 39%. Then damage calculation will use the impact hit zone in full. This is somewhat niche considering that most impact hit zones are similar to cut hit zone values, but it allows you to activate weakness exploit on bits such as Yan Garuga's wings, whereas other cutting weapons wouldn't be able to. How about some notes on guarding? Guarding monster roars is unique. Some roars come from the center of the monster's model, while others come from the head. Knowing where monster roars come from can matter for those counter thrusts, so here's a rule of thumb. Monsters from the 3rd generation or later, like Lagiacrus, will tend to have their roars come from the head. Monsters before then, such as Rathalos, will have the roar come from the center of the model. A few monster attacks in the game are unguardable by default. In general, if the attack is a gas or beam-based attack, then it's usually unguardable. It's not worth getting the special armor skill guard up for these attacks, since you have Hunter Arts as an option, but keep this in mind so you're not caught off guard. If you're trying to figure out where to face the guard attacks, keep an eye on the direction you get knocked back in when you eat an attack. That's the direction you should be guarding. Remember that a lot of attacks' directionality will change based on where you're positioned as well. Lastly, if you have any negation type armor skills such as Tremor Res or Wind Res, the game will still guard the hitboxes of those type of attacks. Don't accidentally use a counter thrust on a Rathalos' aerial charge just because you have Wind Res. You've probably noticed by now, but while you're charging, you have super armor, preventing small knockbacks from ruining your day, like from longsword users. But the wide sweep also provides you super armor. It's a bit more niche, but it plays more into the anti-small monster nature of that attack. Why don't more people know about it? Well, it's because Striker Style doesn't have it. Let's talk about it now. Striker Style removes quite a few attacks. As was just mentioned, you can't perform a wide sweep at all, as along with the strong thrust attacks. Those are replaced with the low thrust 3 and high thrust 3, which functions as they do in previous games. These attacks are way faster than the strong thrust they replace, while also dealing a smidge more damage than the basic thrusts. And perhaps most infamously, Striker also removes all the alternative charge finishers, but get this, powers up the base charge finisher to 67% of your attack. Not only that, but the end lag of your charge finisher is reduced, making looping the charge finisher the main way to use Striker Lance, rather than letting charge take his hit. Of course, you lose the flexibility of the other charged finishers, but if you can land this charged finisher consistently, you can put the kibosh on monsters in a blink of an eye, especially some of Lance's Hunter arts, which we'll go over much later. In the meantime though, let's move on to Aerial. Aerial Lance loses the guard advance, and also the ability to backstep, replacing it with the Aerial Step. This means you can't perform normal step evades at all from idle, only allowing the sidestep evades. In exchange, your jumping thrust is now a jumping strong thrust, hitting 3 times, but not having the same startup and end lag as the grounded version. This also replaces your jumping charge finisher. Furthermore, performing a boost jump will automatically put up your guard, as if you had a guard advanced off of a ledge. This gives you a bunch of protection as long as you land the boost jump and guard in the direction of incoming attacks. Your guard will be put down if you attack, however. Next up, Adept Lance. Adept Lance nixes the counter thrust entirely, preventing you from extending thrust combos. In exchange, you gain the Adept Guard, which is a mechanic that deserves an in-depth explanation. When you press R, your hunter waves the shield around before fully starting a guard. If a monster attack connects during the initial period of this animation, you'll perform an Adept Guard, which instantly negates the attack no matter how strong it is, in addition to consuming 0 stamina as you do so. Keep in mind that your stamina must be in the yellow, as with a normal guard, to execute an Adept Guard. If the incoming attack connects right after the trigger window, then no matter how weak the attack is, you'll take knockback and chip damage. When you successfully perform an Adept Guard, you can immediately attempt another Adept Guard by pressing R again. You can chain Adept Guards forever, as long as you don't fail by missing the timing or if an attack just doesn't connect at all. If you instead do nothing after the first Adept Guard, then you'll block any follow-up attacks as normal. Don't try to spam the Adept Guards. The shield waving acts as a lockout, so treat this as a parry from a fighting game. Oh, and the Adept Guard doesn't work on unguardable attacks either. As Lance, performing an Adept Guard, then pressing X performs the Adept Swipes, after which you can link into your standard thrusting combo. Despite the silly looking animation, this attack hits extremely hard if you manage to hit both swipes. You can perform the Adept Swipes in any direction after you Adept Guard by pressing in the direction you want to attack in as you press X, allowing you to catch monsters that go behind you, for example. Do note that you can perform a charge as soon as you start an Adept Guard animation, and you cannot Adept Guard mid-combo. If you think a monster attack is incoming, you need to give yourself time to return to neutral to start an Adept Guard. However, you can perform Adept Guard sooner after a step evade. Fun fact, this allows you to instantly perform charges from Sheaves compared to Guild. Here comes Valor Lance. In any state, you cannot perform wide sweeps, and you cannot charge or counter thrust from idle or guard. This special attack button now performs the guard advance instead of a charge. During a Valor Sheath, you can press X to perform the Valor Swipes, which is the same as the Adept Swipes, but weaker, and only links into low thrusts outside of Valor state. Pressing X and A from Valor Sheath will instead launch you into a Valor Charge! Outside of Valor state, you cannot counter thrust at all. In Valor state, not only can you high thrust from Valor Swipes, but pressing X and A performs the Valor Shield Smash, which has a guard point at the start of the animation. It's kinda like how the guard advance works, but you smash with the shield automatically. After the Valor Shield Smash, you can perform several actions. X or A to perform thrust attacks, R and A for a counter thrust, or X and A for a charge. While Valor Sheathing provides a better defensive measure for incoming combos than basic guarding does, the real key to Valor Lance lies in the flexibility of combos after a shield smash. Imagine it as a more flexible version of the counter thrust. Multiple incoming attacks in a short period, followed up with an actual counter thrust. Short window for damage, normal thrust. Need to gap close? Try charging at a monster. This one move can be sprinkled in almost anywhere in Valor state, so it results in a unique way to balance defense and offense while playing as Lance. You do lose charge from idle, so it's slightly more painful to take advantage of down windows though. Speaking of which, let's get into some Valor combos. The only real Valor gauge charging combo of note is not too different from a standard thrust combo. Just replace the usual strong thrust with the Valor Swipes if you have the window for it, which should be pretty similar between them. Do remember that outside of Valor state, you can only perform low thrusts after Valor Swipes, which can matter for high profile monsters. The charge from Valor Sheath also doesn't immediately link into anything after the finisher. The best way to continue a combo is to immediately Valor Sheath and perform Valor Swipes. While in Valor state, keep in mind that you can't charge from idle. You always have to shield smash first, which can be awkward if you're used to the single special attack button input. Because shield smash moves you forward a bit, be aware of slipping off the monster, as if you were charging at them. Okay, time to move on to Alchemy. Unlike Striker, Alchemy is still saddled with the strong thrusts and the standard charge finisher damage. What it loses is the counter thrust, the wide sweep, and the turnaround charge finisher. In exchange, the guard advance can be performed with A as well as the follow-up shield bash. The guard thrust can link into the second stage of your basic combo, making attacking from a guarded state easier at the cost of being unable to extend thrust combos. Furthermore, like Adept, you can block more quickly after performing Step Evade instead of having to wait a bit. Like with all Alchemy styles, you can perform an Alchemy Barrel Sheath after any Step Evade by pressing R and Y, even if you don't have the Alchemy Barrel selected in the item bar. To charge the Alchemy gauge faster, land strong thrusts. Time for meta-analysis. If you played multiplayer with a Lance user, like, ever, you definitely know which style's the best. It's Striker! Striker has a bevy of advantages that make it the best for standard play. Not only does it have the faster third thrust that it can stick in way more windows compared to the strong thrust, but that chunky monkey charge finisher really hurts. Plus, 3 Hunter Art slots give Striker Lance the widest access to run the arts which benefit Lance so much in this game. Striker Lance is still more punishing to play without the typical benefits of something like Valor Longsword's guard point, so if you still find yourself eating too much damage, I'd recommend using 2 absolutes rather than Corkscrew Jab. And that's not to say Striker Lance has 0 weaknesses. The damage output of looping charge finishers is limited to monsters where the weak spot is actually on the ground. If you fight monsters that have their weak spot even elevated slightly off of the ground, so your finisher can't hit them, you'll have to settle for normal thrust combos instead. Also, if you whiff your charge finisher a lot, you won't have the nice range of the turnaround finisher to work with, so be sure to land them as often as you can. And finally, looping that charge finisher can be tempting, but it is still a commitment to loop over and over again. If you're not smart about it, monsters can catch you in the startup for the charge, so be wary. There isn't really any good reason to use anything other than Striker aside from the elevated skill floor needed to pilot it. Well, I can think of one reason. Weak spot floating just off of the ground getting you down? Does the monster smacking you out of a charge animation make you steamy? Or just want to play Lance in something other than Striker? Adept Lance has your back. Adept guarding completely flips the script on guarding, rewarding skilled play with big damage dumps and absolutely no stamina consumption. It does only have 1 Hunter Art slot and has to play around the strong thrust, but the damage output of Adept Lance can sometimes rival or exceed that of Striker Lance if you're falling victim to the higher skill floor it demands. Monsters with a lack of telegraphs or plenty of mix-up options can still catch you off guard though. The remaining styles are all on the same level, so I'll just talk about them in no specific order. Don't go showing your friends saying, "Oh, he rated Aerial bad again, time to dislike," you hear? Speaking of which, Aerial Lance is okay. The guard advance being replaced with the aerial hop and boost jump is fine, but you do have to rely more on actually landing the boost jump in order to be protected from things. If you do land it, the guarded jump will protect you for as long as you don't attack, so resist the urge to mash. Another sour spot with Aerial Lance is that, because of all the strong thrusts going around, you'll eat sharpness pretty fast, so take that into consideration when choosing a weapon with Aerial Lance. The quote-unquote best thing about Aerial Lance is that it's easily the most elemental or status-oriented lance style, so if you want a meme with a weird-ass status lance, try Aerial to commit to the meme harder. Guild Lance is fine. It's the style you run if you want access to the turnaround finisher and more Hunter Arts than the 1-slot styles. Anything bad I'd have to say about Guild Lance extends to Lance in general, really. Valor Lance is the #1 contender for the "what the heck does this weapon style combo do" list, right next to Valor Sword and Shield. The Shield Smash in Valor State does give you a lot of flexibility, but it doesn't really offer the same upfront power that Striker Lance can offer, and is a far cry from other Valor styles. This hasn't even touched on the #1 downside of Valor Lance, charging the Valor Gauge. It's fairly difficult to do since the actions you do to charge the Valor Gauge faster are on the more committal side, so you can't charge it up quickly on smaller windows. Access to the Valor Sheath in a pinch is a good universal defensive option for Lance though, greatly reducing the risk you take if you're about to get comboed. Unfortunately for Alchemy Lance, it is outdone by Striker Lance in almost every conceivable angle, even defensively, since normal guarding, what Alchemy focuses on, is not a good idea. There have been occasional moments where I wouldn't have taken hits if I had Alchemy's increased guard after step evade speed, but this is not exactly a compelling reason to use Alchemy. Yes, if you squint your eyes really hard, then the Alchemy barrel items exist, but good luck actually using them in multiplayer. At least it has 3 Hunter Art slots, but really if you're using Alchemy Lance solely for that, you should probably just use Striker instead. In a vacuum, Alchemy Lance is fine. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a world where a Striker Lance exists. You've been hearing about how Lance is great hunter arts, so let's go over them now. Shield Assault is a standard charge attack, but you use your shield to dash forward rather than Lance. After a set distance, you'll automatically stop, but if you press X before then, you'll perform a cooler Lance charge finisher. None of the alternative charge finishers can be performed, by the way. The main benefit of this art is that you don't use stamina while using this art, unlike the standard charge, and even regenerates stamina as you use it. Furthermore, you automatically guard incoming attacks, also taking 0 stamina knockback during use, unless it has heavy knockback. You'll get knocked out if using this art if so. In addition, you will still need your stamina to be in the yellow to successfully guard attacks, and you'll still get hit out of this art if you try to block unblockable attacks with it. You can also go up ledges using this art, but you won't jump into the air if you try to go down ledges. You'll instead either get stuck if it's a large drop-off, or stick to the ground if it's a small drop. Increasing ranks increases the distance you travel. Corkscrew Jab makes you charge up for a bit, then unleashes a powerful thrust directly forward, dealing multiple hits. This art, unlike most other arts, doesn't consume sharpness, and the hitbox it has extends for quite a large distance. If you use this, make sure the squishiest hit zone is in the direction you want to hit, and nothing else. Increasing ranks increases the charge time, but also increases the number of hits and damage dealt. You're gonna want to strap in for Enraged Guard. This art is nutty. Enraged Guard brings up your shield upon use, bracing yourself for the next incoming attack. If an attack connects during this time, you'll gain an attack boost based on the power of the attack that triggered the hit. The stronger the hit, the stronger the boost. Blocking a weak attack grants a red aura, boosting your attack by 10%. Blocking a medium attack grants an orange aura, boosting your attack by 20%. And, get this, strong attacks give you a white-yellow aura, boosting your attack by a massive 30%. Regardless of how strong the incoming attack is, you'll take no chip damage and consume no stamina. But like all guards, your stamina needs to be in the yellow to successfully guard. If you attempt to guard a normally unguardable attack, you'll take damage as normal. Like Counter Thrust, Enraged Guard will immediately put down your guard after the first hit. So if you try to block multi-hit attacks or otherwise get hit before you finish the buffing animation, you'll lose the effect and have to charge Enraged Guard again. Unlike the Counter Thrust, Enraged Guard's effect is purely based on the strength of the incoming attack. Getting Guard +1 or +2 will not lower the strength of the buff you get. Increasing ranks increases the effect duration. Unlike what the game says, it does not boost your attack further. Healing Shield spreads healing juice on your shield, after which guarding attacks will heal you and the allies nearby, shown by the healing particles. Any guarded attack will trigger the heal, even those from other guard-like effects such as Shield Assault and Adept Guard or Guard Advance. Allies only receive 66% of the healing that you do, however. Increasing ranks increases effect duration. Let's review these arts, shall we? If it wasn't obvious from the recommended hunter arts and from the warning to strap in for it, Enraged Guard is top tier. If you're coming from other games and are like, well, 30% doesn't sound like a bunch, let me give you some context. Pierce Up, a staple skill for Pierce bowguns in this game, grants plus 10% attack to all Pierce shot, so the max boost is 3 times that. Critical hits at base grant plus 25% attack. The max boost, therefore, basically gives you crits on all of your attacks that can then also crit on top of that. In fact, 30% attack is the second strongest boost in the game, being on the same level as Adrenaline +2 and slightly weaker than Feline Heroics, which has 35% attack. But both of those skills require your health be at 40% or less than 10, respectively. In fact, this hunter art is so good that it is easily in the top 2 hunter arts in the entire game, alongside Absolute Readiness, and can debatably be the best hunter art in the entire game, if it wasn't locked to Lance. This art almost single-handedly makes Lance go from slightly below average in performance to top 5. Put simply, if you don't use this art, you simply aren't playing GU Lance. Now, that's not to say this art is completely free. The uptime can be lowered through you fucking up and not blocking anything, or worse, accidentally blocking a weaker attack and locking you into the weaker boosts for the duration. The monster can also refuse to cooperate and not give you the strong attack you need to activate an Enraged Guard, but everything else about this art is gravy. Just remember that monsters' attack strengths can change based on whether or not they're enraged, and make sure you aren't hit by follow-up attacks while you're buffing yourself up. Up next is Corkscrew Jab. It's short, sweet, and dumps a bunch of damage given even shorter windows. It even has a bit of extra range to penetrate through less great hit zones and hit the juicy ones. You should vary up the rank you're using based on the window you're given, which means rank 2 is sometimes taken over rank 3. It's a fantastic hunter art that goes understated, but is appreciated on Lance and actually works as an offensive hunter art. Right, Trans/? Shield Assault is fine. Since most players either use Mega Dash uses or using a combination of Absolute Readiness, Corkscrew Jab, and Enraged Guard, or even Absolute Evasion over Corkscrew Jab, this art isn't seen much, but in theory it's a nice way to close gaps without burning a bunch of stamina to do so. Unlike normal charging, Shield Assault speed can mean that you don't land as many ticks on the monster, and the finisher can be a bit tricky to land. But gap closing as Lance with not nearly as much risk to your health as normally charging is appreciated. For what it is, Healing Shield is mildly decent, and those words might even be too strong for what it is. In solo play, the best Healing Shield will do is negate the chip damage you take when defending against stronger attacks. But remember what I said about the whole guarding is a bad idea in this game thing? Not to mention the cast time, which is pretty lengthy. Even in multiplayer, the likely intended use case for this art, allies have to be near you to receive the healing effect. This doesn't work like a life powder whenever you get hit. And the obvious problem with that is that your allies don't take less damage when you guard something. They'll eat all the damage and therefore might not even come out unscathed. The one good thing about this hunter art is that, unlike healing files from Charge Blade, it doesn't actively reduce your damage output, so at least it's got that going for it. Inspired by oils and healing files, huh Lance? Maybe you should have taken inspiration from Enraged Guard instead so we could get Enraged Guard 2. Let's talk progression. Don't worry, this'll be quick. Like most other Blade Master weapons, progression is straightforward. Petrified, Obsidian, Elder weapons can easily get you through the endgame if you prefer, along with the typical armor lineups of Bouja, Rathalos Mix S, and Saint Across. Now for in-depth progression. Starting in Village 1, we have the standard Petrified Lance. Recall that with yellow sharpness, you cannot charge off of monsters without bouncing, so you gotta wait before you get into that train mindset, you hear? In Village 2, the Petrified Lance gets another upgrade, and you also get access to Spiked Spear, which is your first good lance of green sharpness. Don't forget the Bouja armor set by helping out the Poke Village folk. In Village 3, the Petrified Lance gets to level 4, unlocking its length of green sharpness. Moving right along to Village 4, we have a few options. Iron Lance level 5 hits hard, and has a good length of green sharpness at 60 units. It can be somewhat out of the way though, and it doesn't really see any use beyond this point, so you can skip it. An alternative which gets future use is the Sainator Stinger from Shogun Sainator. You upgrade into this lance from Daimyo Primotor's Bone Claw Lance. This has the largest green sharpness at this point with a massive 90 units, and will be your main lance of choice through late G rank progression. If you're interested, it might also be worth swapping into Sainator's armor set as well for slightly earlier access to Razor Sharp at this point. It can make maintaining sharpness way easier for Lance, especially if you're not submitting to the Striker Lance conglomerate. Up in Village 5, we got Spike Spear level 3, which still has its massive length of green going up to 100 units. We also have Gammus Giant's Jouster, here for its impressive 140 attack and 50 green at this point in progression. On the armor side, we also have Rathalos' armor set and mix set, the latter of which is valuable to progress with. Going up to Village 6, we have two main options. Seregius' Harbor Lance, which has its auto-sharpening mechanic going for it, alongside a smidge of blue. If you can maintain the smidge of blue with absolute readiness, also available in Hub 3-star from the quest Wyvern Sandrunners, it'll hit pretty hard at this point. But don't sweat it if you go into green. The alternative and more painful option is getting a Rusted Lance, so you can fight Hub 3-star Kushala de Orda for its Ice Steel Spear. It's got high attack power at 150, and 70 units of green sharpness. To be honest, this might be a bit out of the way for most people, but it is technically the best lance at this point in the game. Oh, before we move on, I should probably shout out Nakarkus specifically. Nakarkus is coded as a wall, including the necks of the heads it's got, meaning you'll bounce off of them with a charge attack, no matter what you do. It's sad. You'll have to stab and jab out of your way in Nakarkus, and the same goes for the high rank fight too. Moving on to high rank, we got the Obsidian Lance, a great general option that upgrades from the Petrified Lance. The blue sharpness is still thin at this point, so you shouldn't rely on maintaining it through the entire hunt. If you want to leg up on that, the Harbor Lance also gets an upgrade here, which also gives it 20 units of blue sharpness, same as the Obsidian Lance. However, if you cannot manage to keep that sharpness high, The last alternative option is Barroth's Rugged Lance. I know the negative affinity looks scary, but it really hits hard with that base 180 attack for this point in progression. In Village 8, the Obsidian Lance gets another upgrade, as does the Harbor Lance. The attack difference on the Obsidian Lance can mean it hits harder than the Harbor Lance, but if you can manage to maintain the blue sharpness on the Harbor Lance, it'll make you sharpen less often in the hunt, meaning more indirect DPS. Oh, and Shogun Senator's armor set comes back here, in case you want a modern Razor Sharp option. In the back half of high rank, we have the Senator Stinger level 4, with an impressive 40 units of blue sharpness and 190 attack. If you manage to get the Hub 6 and defeat some of the introductory Hyper monsters there, you'll be able to upgrade the Obsidian Lance too, giving it just as much blue sharpness, but a bit of attack power on top. There's also Rathalos' armor set and mix set to grab while you're here, and in Village 10, we have no direct upgrades. Hub 7 star changes that by giving the Senator Stinger upgrades of hyper parts, turning it into the Senator Piercer. For those that insist on staying around in high rank to clear out all the content before moving on to G rank, pick up the Hellblade Granat from Hellblade Glaveness. It's great for wiping up weaker single monsters and huntathons with a solid 20 units of white and blast damage. For a more sharpness friendly option, consider Grimclaw Lance from Grimclaw Tigrex. It's got 30 units of white sharpness and 40 more units of blue compared to Hellblade, so it's good for longer single target hunts. Also consider Silver Rathalos' Silver Soul set, and for village completionists, try getting the High Soul mix set to kick some major ass. We're in G rank. We start off with the classic Elder Lance as a starter. 10 units of white sharpness and 30 units of blue sharpness is a bomber, but it's easy to make and it has 260 attack. Definitely make the Discovery Lance through the Soratorium's lab upgrades for a great sharpness friendly option. In G2, the Elder Lance gets upgraded to the Sage Lance, making it way more usable, especially for Lao, who's just asking to get stabbed extremely hard in the crotch over and over again by Striker Lance users. Submit to the Conglomerate, it has high DPS! Oh, and don't forget getting Senator Cross as a fantastic armor set at this point. Though for Lao, you'll have to swap out the Weakness Exploit for something else, because Lao's weak spot is hardly accessible. Consider Repeat Offender instead. The last half of G rank is real straightforward. Remember that Senator Lance? You're gonna be using it a bunch here. G3 grants it a bunch of white sharpness, while the G4 upgrade, using hyper parts, turns it into Master Piercer, with a bunch of white sharpness and 330 attack. Nice! As for armor, you might want to consider Rathalos for the last time if you desperately need an upgrade. The Senator Cross is good enough, but hey, if you want more defense, Rathalos is there. We're in Endgame now! Let's briefly talk about what you want to look for in your armor and lances. For armor skills, the standard setup, typically for Striker Lance, is similar to other Blade Master weapons. Use sharpness skills as appropriate for your weapon, then just stack affinity as your charms allow. Lances usually always take Razor Sharp, unless you're exceptionally blessed with a long length of sharpness, which is even more mandatory if you're not using Striker, and instead charging into the monster constantly. Charging into the monster eats 3 sharpness per tick, so Razor Sharp makes each tick consume 1 sharpness instead. I need to mention the guard and evasion skills here. If you're coming from previous games in the series, you might know that guard and evasion lance sets were things that people use, partially because the skill floor of lance plays on the higher end without those defensive skills. With Hunter Arts, those playstyles are obsolete, because Absolute Readiness and Evasion replace the slow guarding playstyle, and make the Evasion playstyle mostly redundant. If you feel like reliving those days or hate the Absolute Hunter Arts because, I don't know, maybe they killed your parents, you can run Guard or Evasion, but never both. Both tend to be overkill. Also, because Adept Lance gives you infinite guard, it's never worth running any defensive skills on there, because you can simply be a good enough gamer to use the Adept Guard, alright? A few more notes. You should prefer Guard plus 1. Guard plus 2 is usually unnecessary. If you think you need Guard, carefully consider whether or not it actually gets you more windows to counterattack the monster, or if you're just taking it because you feel like it. Guard plus 2 can help open up windows on certain hyper monsters, but be aware that monsters can still chip past your guard, and that guard doesn't work if you're facing the wrong direction. Guard up is also incredibly unnecessary because of both the rarity of attacks that actually need it, and the fact that you usually don't care about the few attacks that do. You don't need to guard everything, just enough things. On the other hand, Evasion plus 2 is wholly unnecessary. Evasion plus 3 doesn't exist here because we all universally agree that it was not a good idea. Evasion plus 2 only gives you 2 more frames than Evasion plus 1 in exchange for 5 extra armor skill points, so not worth it. Rely on Evasion plus 1. Evade Extender is also not extremely useful. It does make your step evades go further, but is usually unnecessary for gap closing. Charge already fulfills that goal. For evading, well, you're already using evasion +1, so it's unnecessary and sometimes even detrimental to your play. Hop just a bit too far and you'll be out of position, and fail to follow up with your thrust attacks. As for good lances, the number one thing to focus on is sharpness. This can greatly vary based on how you're playing lance. For striker lance play, you can get away with thinner sharpnesses, if you can both spam absolute readiness and land frequent charged finishers in the matchup. If you can accomplish this, the damage of your charged finishers will cycle your absolute readiness faster, meaning better sharpness upkeep. If you can't, then you're gonna need to stick on more sharpness skills or get a lance that's more favorable to frequent thrust attacks. As a reminder, you can check exact sharpness values on Kiranika by using Inspect Element and hovering over the sharpness bars. Each pixel of length is 5 units of sharpness, so Circuit Tit here, with 4 pixels of purple, has 20 units of purple sharpness at base. Speaking of which, the bare minimum for sharpness links is about 15 for a striker lance. Adjust upwards if you're, for example, not spamming absolute readiness, not using a deviant weapon for its hunter or charge rate boost, not playing striker, etc. Even with 15 sharpness, you're gonna want to run razor sharp, as mentioned before. Aside from sharpness, the balance between raw attack power and element can also vary somewhat. If you're using striker and can land frequent charge finishers, raw attack power is gonna be what you're focusing on. 330 and up is great. Keep in mind that Enraged Guard also gives you a proportional attack boost. Unfortunately, very few lances with element have comparable attack power. But if you're only using thrust attacks or not using striker, element can be an okay substitute. Do keep in mind that charge applies a heavy elemental damage penalty, so using an elemental lance is likely not worth it in matchups where you can do that a lot. Good elemental values range from the low 20s to the mid 30s. Natural affinity is also nice to have, but is usually less required, since you can dedicate your armor skills to boosting it as much as possible. Okay, let's break down the best lances in the game. The best lance in the game is going to be Atlkaz or Ket. It's got a well-balanced array of stats, having 330 attack combined with 20 purple sharpness at base, as well as triple slots for that all-important set flexibility. This is a great lance to make if you want to get into lance. At a higher level of play, Atl is better with higher challenger uptime to make up for the lack of affinity than Contender, the Elderfrost Stampede. Elderfrost Gambit's lance comes up as a great option with sky-high 380 attack power. Though it does need sharpness +2 and only has 20 white sharpness, absolute readiness spam is made easier through the deviant boost, increasing your hunter arc charge rate. A similar substitute to the Elderfrost Stampede is the Great Ogre Tusk. It's got a lower sharpness bar to clear, with at least sharpness +1 and razor sharp being recommended to gain access to purple sharpness, but it loses the deviant boost and a bit of attack. It still packs a punch despite this, and can even beat Elderfrost Stampede as long as it can maintain the purple. Finally, Rust Razor Stinger comes in the back of the standard recommendations as the boy with the long white sharpness. It's got enough to ignore all the sharpness skills, and even absolute readiness. So if you're running into issues with the Adel Lance, or if you're running a 1 art slot style and are looking for a more sharpness friendly option, this is it. Now, technically this last recommendation isn't really used in high-end play, but I found it to be especially friendly to my Guild No Arts playstyle, and this is my video, so mom told me I can make the recommendations. The Great Tigrex Lance is my homebrew selection for my runs. You've probably seen it in the B-roll I've been using. I chose it because it's got some decent attack power and naturally maxed sharpness, combined with razor sharp to alleviate the sharpness loss from constantly charging. I find that this lance performs well in the specific environment I'm in, namely Guild No Arts. No access to readiness really changes the game, you know? At a higher level of play, the negative affinity puts a damper on the charge finisher consistency, but I don't count my staggers, so I'm content with it. Now for the various flavors of element, in case you want your hit effects to look slightly different. Remember, charge attacks, not finishers, apply a heavy elemental penalty, so don't prefer elemental lances for this case. For fire, we got Rathalos' Red Prominence. It's got a great attack of 340 with a decent addition of 25 fire. The sharpness at +1 is a bit thin at 15 purple, so if you think you need more, sharpness +2 is fine. Same goes for Okimi Kaisei, Tolseer Mizutsune's lance. The attack is a bit on the lower side at 310, but it's got a decent amount of natural affinity to work with, as well as deviant boosts. The Thunder option is Lagiacrus's Perfect Storm Doris. The distribution of stats is similar to the Red Prominence, so the skills they use are the same. Razor Sharp and at least Sharpness +1 are recommended. Dragon's got 2 options. Gormagala's Sorna asks for maximum sharpness investment, but gives you a good amount of Dragon and natural affinity to compensate. By contrast, Lao Shanlung's Sealed Dragon Lance's sharpness requirement is not necessary. but it is still really nice to have. Now for the status options. Deadeye Calamity has a great amount of base white sharpness, combined with a good amount of poison and some natural affinity. The boosted Hunter Art charge rate is also nice. For Para, it'll be Dark Chainer from the Hornator Small Monster. Naturally, max sharpness is cool. For Sleep, two options. Dark Din, the alternative Hornator option, has many of the same properties as its para-focused cousin, max sharpness. By contrast, Night Cloak Malfestios' Cloak Samay requires sharpness plus 2, but has a good amount of attack and higher sleep. At last, for Blast, we have Hellblade Glavenus' Hellblade Granat Nova. The attack is on the worst side of 300, but the max sharpness and blast make it attractive for hunts on the shorter end. I gotta admit, I've never really clicked with Lance in this game before, and picking up again for this guide really reminded me why. Base Lance without any defensive skills is abysmal to play, requiring a high amount of skill to play at an even adequate level, combined with a bunch of iframe tech. And I know me. 95% of the time in Monhun, better positioning will beat out iframing. Unfortunately for Lance, that number turns more into 50%, where good positioning for maximum damage often involves iframing incoming attacks as well, else you'll be eating dirt. Combine this with the slower charge finisher on non-striker styles, as well as the generally sluggish guarding mechanics, and you have a recipe for highly variable matchups. Some matchups you won't be able to do anything of note on, like Seregius not only outmaneuvering you, but also breaking down your guard with the multi-hit scales. But those will be real breezy, because you won't have to guard much, if at all, and just spam charge stacks at the weak spot. Lagiacrus, for instance, is the poster boy of being dumpstered by Lance, since you can camp out the chest while counterattacking with counter thrusts. In GU, Lance feels propped up by the existence of Hunter Arts, greatly easing the defensive and offensive requirements of Lance with the absolute Hunter Arts, as well as Enraged Guard just giving you all the damage. I'd go as far as to say that GU Lance is less made up of the base moveset and more of GU's unique mechanics. This, by itself, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it makes me worry about what will happen to Lance when these mechanics go away. Sure, Lance is fantastic in this game, but when all these tools go away, will Lance just go back to feeling anemic and helpless against choice few matchups? Not to mention, Striker Lance is insidious for having all of the benefits. 3 Hunter Art slots, a faster third thrust, and a much stronger charge finisher, while all the other styles are saddled with the slower strong thrust and the slower charge finishers that they have to play around. It's like if Valor Heavy Bowgun, in addition to it existing, gave all the other styles reload speed minus 99. Like, yeah, sure, you can play Guild Lance, but with the weaker and way more annoying strong thrust in conjunction with the end laggier charge finishers, there's not much justification you can make against just swapping the Striker Lance, performing way better while also not having to deal with the major annoyances they toss into the other styles. Despite that, unlike the other strong styles of Valor Longsword, Valor Heavy Bowgun, or Valor Greatsword, Striker Lance demands a lot from the player in order to play it at a high level. Sure, in your multiplayer hunts they might be trampling your ass over, but in single player play, Lance users are freaking out over their stamina, eating a bit too much chip damage from guarding, or eating shit because they fail to iframe. It's hard to play, with little margin for error. Heck, picking up Lance reinforces my respect for Lance mains. They're having it rough out there. Yeah, take that, people who think I hate on the meta styles just because they're meta. I respect Striker Lance mains, up to the point where they're running me over. Then I can be concerned. Anyway, go out there and have fun cosplaying as Train and trampling people. Be sure to give those monsters some really good dental surgery. Or just shove your lance up their ass.